All right, first name, Sean, S-E-A-N, last name, D. Guzman, spelled with a lowercase d-e, followed by a space, and then capital G-U-Z-M-A-N. So, all right, good morning, everyone. My name is Sean D. Guzman. I am the manager of DWR's Snow Surveys and Water Supply Forecasting Unit. And we're here for the second measurement of the year here at the Phillips Station Snow Course, which is our February measurement. And again, this just represents just one out of over 260 different snow courses that are measured statewide by different cooperators of the California Cooperative Snow Surveys program. So for our survey today, we recorded a snow depth of 85.5 inches and a snow water content of 33.5 inches. That results in 193% of average to date and 137% of the April 1 average here at this location. We always use that April 1 snow metric because in terms of snow water content, that's typically when we see our peak annual snowpack. In comparison to our statewide automated sensor network, our statewide snowpack is currently sitting at 205% of average to date as of this morning. I'll go ahead and repeat those numbers. Our survey today recorded a snow depth of 85.5 inches and a snow water content of 33.5. That's 193% of average to date and 137% of the April 1 average at this location. Again, statewide, our statewide snowpack based off of our automated snow sensor network is 205% of average. Our snowpack is off to an incredible start, and it's exactly what California needs to really help break from our ongoing drought. We're actually currently outpacing 1982-1983, which is the wettest year on record, dating back about 40 years. Thanks in part to 9 different atmospheric rivers that hit California, bringing much needed rain and snow. However, for every day that it doesn't rain or snow, we gradually return to drier conditions. Complementary to our manual snow measurements, our program has already started our data acquisition flights with our partners at airborne snow observatories, and they are actually currently measuring snow from aircraft atop airplanes, measuring snow using LiDAR so that we can actually accurately verify snowfall in places we've never been able to reach before. We've seen an impressive increase in reservoir storage statewide, but there are still some of these larger reservoirs that are actually still below average, such as Lake Shasta. Reservoir operators are doing everything that they can to capture as much water as possible. And since December 1st, we've actually seen an increase of almost 9 million acre feet in reservoir storage statewide. California really just experienced the wettest 3-week period, followed by the driest 3 years in the state's recorded history. And the precipitation California received from these recent storms really helped ease a lot of those drought concerns that we've had. But those impacts really vary by location because California is really such a large state, and you really need to evaluate those impacts on a regional scale, and it's also based on local water supply conditions. With that, I will pass it over to the Director of the Department of Water Resources, Caroline Namath.
Thank you, Sean, and it's great to be out here again, and exciting to be out here. Last time we were here, we weren't measuring really the bulk of the atmospheric rivers that came in. And we are starting to assess water supply conditions, but I want to touch on something that Sean mentioned, which is the importance of April 1st as our traditional day in which we articulate what kind of water year we're actually having. And that's because, of course, our traditional wet months are still ahead of us, and I will point out that this is a traditional wet month that is actually starting off pretty dry, and given where the forecasts are, that dryness is expected to continue. As Sean mentioned, what's important about that April 1 date is also that's the traditional day in which our snowpack is the highest, is at its peak. What is happening with climate is the timing of that peak is also changing. So we really don't know here on February 1st whether or not this is the peak of our snowpack. And those are really important data points that help us manage water in California. So moving forward, as we anticipate all this snow melting and what we have to manage in our rivers, streams, and reservoirs, we are readying ourselves, particularly south of here in the southern Sierra. We are readying ourselves to make sure that we can take advantage of that snow melt, which, given the snowpack, is likely to be excessive, and getting that water into our groundwater basins. So really taking advantage of what we would consider to be snowmelt floodwaters and recharging that into our groundwater basins, which are always challenged in terms of drought recovery. It takes a lot longer to fill our groundwater basins than it does our reservoir storage. And our groundwater basins hold about 10 times the amount of water that our surface water reservoirs do here in California. So when we think about drought and when we think about, does our big January actually bust the drought in California? It's too soon to tell. And we need to take the lessons of the most recent couple of years in which we've seen that peak snowpack date change, in which we've seen runoff conditions drop off dramatically, and which we've seen storm conditions shut down and then be followed by excessive dry periods, again, during what we traditionally know as the wettest periods in California. So I don't want to be the downer here, but I do want to make sure that everyone understands that we need to exercise caution. This is a fantastic way to be starting our winter. It's wonderful to be here on February 1st at 194% of average for that date. Couldn't have asked for anything better, but there's a lot more that needs to play out over the course of the next several months for us to really capture our full water supply picture here in California. So all Californians, turn off your sprinklers. That's a great way to conserve water. And I think we look forward to just opening it up to any questions you all might have. Thanks again for joining us. Yeah, so for folks who heard that question or did not hear that question, how concerned is the department about runoff conditions? And as you may recall, in 2021, we had a steep decline in runoff that was largely due to warm temperatures, evaporation, but also the snow melt really seeping into very dry soils. Last year, that was less the case. There's indicators that this year we won't have that sublimation into the dry soils because of the wet pattern that preceded all of this snow. So I think we're less concerned about that. But as we experience these warmer ambient temperatures, that does evaporate water or snow more quickly, and we don't realize that as a water supply source that we have become accustomed to managing here in California. So warming temperatures are an increased demand on our available surface water. And those are the things that we're watching very closely that can affect our runoff into rivers, streams, and reservoirs. Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, at the start of the year, we started October pretty dry, so we still had a lot of that dry soil, but luckily we did get some of that rain in the fall and November and especially December to really help wet those soils and prime them for runoff so that our snowpack isn't actually sitting on top of dry earth. So we are seeing somewhere in between last year of 2022 and 2021 being on the bottom end, somewhere in between in terms of soil moisture, but hopefully nothing that like what we've seen before, but that's something that we're tracking very closely with our partners. Sure. Yeah, so the question was, with changing conditions, how do we adjust our forecast based off of current conditions, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's, been dry for a month or two, right? That's basically a question. So in terms of the forecasting, right, I also manage the water supply forecasting group at DWR, and that's one of our main jobs, right, is forecasting that water supply. But that's something we track every day with how the runoff's actually looking on a daily basis. And that's something that we work with our partners where we're sharing data from all over the state. So we're actually able to track, what's actually showing up in the reservoirs versus what's actually changing in the snowpack. Right now, you don't see necessarily as much melt as people would expect, with it being, cooler. But what really drives the snow melt is how much sunlight's actually getting, right? The solar radiation is what is actually melting the snow. We don't have nearly as much sunlight as we do, in the winter months. By the time you get to April 1, you get a lot more sun on that snowpack. So we don't see very much melt right now. But in terms of the forecasting, we've made various improvements to that where we're shifting towards physically based, spatially explicit water supply forecasting models. Yeah. Sure.
Last week you guys upped the allocation for the State Water Project to Southern California, I think to 30%. Do you think you'll be able to up those numbers more, or when will you sort of be able to determine what that allocation is?
So the question was about what we think the impact of today's information will be on the allocation. It is too soon to tell. We did up the allocation from 5% to 30% last week. It did not take into consideration the significant snowmelt. So what we need to do now is go back to the shop, and all the number crunching that Sean described will enable us to reevaluate what we can anticipate relative to long-term runoff into rivers, streams, and reservoirs over the course of the summer, and then we would make an adjustment. So presumably we'll have another adjustment to our water supply allocation in late February. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.